he showed it to Terry Gilliam and said, look at this, he's kept this all these years. And, we met, I helped him out. I tried to scare him out of it and he didn't work. And Terry said, well, that's wonderful. So, Chris was responsible for you becoming an actor. And I said, yeah, he was. And he said, so I'm to blame for this life of misery and pain and rejection? And I said, well, I haven't really had much of that. And he said, well, what are you doing wrong?
The Theatre Curation Project was born in the spirit of stewardship over the art, craft, and history of the theatre. Its purpose is to curate these stories of our mentors and what they passed on to us to be a resource for future generations. Its goal is to preserve these stories and the lessons within them from being lost forever.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Gray. I'm an actor, director, writer, and producer, and I've been in this wonderful business for over 40 years. I have worked in stages across Canada, the United States, and Britain. I've worked for many years in Toronto, and now I'm based in Vancouver. I've done over 250 films and television shows. I was a series lead recently on Legion. I've also been on many shows shooting in Riverdale right now. And I have worked at the Stratford Festival, at Canadian Stage, at Crow's Theatre, at Tarragon Theatre Passe-Muraille, the Arts Club of Vancouver. So I've been lucky to be a working actor and director for many years. I wouldn't be an actor or a director at all if it hadn't been for the wonderful serendipity of Christopher Plummer and his encouragement when I was 15 years old. So I'm here to talk about Chris Plummer. When I was 15, I was obsessed with becoming an actor. I wanted to see as many plays as I could. I really thought that it was something I wanted to do. I acted in school, and I was also very enamored with Chris Plummer because he had just played Wellington in Waterloo, and I thought it was brilliant. And I knew that my uncle, Robert Barclay, who was the founder of the Directors Guild of Canada, had been a friend with Chris back in the days of the Ottawa Repertory Theatre and the early days in Toronto, and they'd known each other for a long time. And so when Chris came to Toronto to do Cyrano de Bergerac at the Royal Alexandra Theatre in 1973, I got my uncle to write me a letter of introduction, and I also got my mother to do it because she knew Chris from back in Ottawa as well. So these letters went to him, and he agreed to meet me and talk to me about my desire to become an actor. So on the given day, I went and saw the play in the afternoon, in the matinee, and then I went back in the evening and saw the play again, and then I went to meet him backstage afterwards. And he had many friends there from New York and London and Stratford. People had come in to see him, and they were all told to wait because he decided to see me first. So I was taken backstage and met Chris, and he was still in costume and still had his Cyrano nose on. They showed me the backstage with the props table and sound effects boards and where they did the gunfire and so on. It was amazing. It was a eye-opening, crazy Alice in Wonderland trip. And we went back to his dressing room, and he took off his Cyrano nose and showed me how it was made and how it was applied and so on. He got me to sit down at a small table while he took his makeup off. And he said, so I understand you want to be an actor. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, all right, well, let's get down to brass tacks. First things first. Do you need to be an actor? Now, I was just 15. I just turned 15, and I wasn't sure what that meant, but I thought, okay. And so I said, well, I don't know if I need to do it, but it's the only thing I really want to do. And he said, good, that's a start. We'll start with that. Because it's a very demanding profession, and it demands 100% concentration and devotion, and you need to give it 100% of your energy and your time at all times. And if you find, once you get into it and you're doing it, that if you don't need to do it, because you need to need it. And if you find that you don't need it, and it's something that's not quite alive in you, then you must step away. Because it's a very small room, and there's a lot of people who want in this room. And there's not very much room in the room. So if you're in there and your heart's not in it, you're taking space from somebody who really wants to be in there. You have to really want it. So it's a tough profession, and you have to know going in what it entails. I mean, it's joyous and it's fun and we enjoy what we do. We love what we do, but it can be full of rejection and heartache and misery and hard work and, senses of failure, and it can be very frustrating at times. But if you apply yourself and you give it all you've got and you have some good fortune along the way, it can be the most satisfying and rewarding profession. It can be full of joy and laughter and fun and love. And there's nothing like it. So he was giving me a lot in one little go. And so he then told me about why he'd chosen to be an actor, and he wanted to do music originally, but he went into acting, and he told me about people he'd trained with, and he'd had the good fortune to work with really good people from an early age. And he just sort of talked about the delights of acting, and that he'd wanted to do Cyrano for many years and so on. So we came to when he really needed to get on his way, and he said, give me your hand. So I took my hand and shook his hand, and he shook my hand, and he said, I want you to make me a promise. I want you to promise me that you will give acting 100%. You'll give it a full effort. You'll work at your craft every day. And if you feel that you don't need it anymore, you'll step away. Can you make that promise to me? And I looked him right back in the eye, and his eyes were really intense. And I said, yes. He put his hand over our joined hands, and he said, good. Well then, I look forward to sharing a stage with you one day. And that was it for me. That was enough. That was the bite, that was the magic wand, that was it. And I knew I wanted to be an actor, and I'd made that promise to him. And between you and I and the world, I've kept that promise to him ever since. And I always throw 100% in. I always work hard at my craft. I try and do it with full respect for the craft, for my fellow workers, for everything. And I love the joy of working hard. And he taught me that before I even got into it. So 20 years later, I got cast in the series Counter-Strike. Director George Mendeluk saw me and had read me for something else and thought that I could play opposite Chris. He needed someone who he felt could be tough and sort of arrogant and and very English. And so I told him about the story that I just told you, and he said, oh, this will be great. Chris will love that. It'll be wonderful. And, this is a wonderful thing. Have you acted with him before? And I said, no. And George was very thrilled that he could make that happen. So on the first day, and we'd had a nice meeting, and I reminded him of who I was, and he was really delighted, and he asked after my uncle and so on. Anyway, we got into we were shooting in the old mental hospital way out on the lakeshore. And it was cold, and it was in a warehouse part of it, and it was just freezing cold, and we were standing there. Our stand-ins were being used for something else. So we were nose to nose, like literally nose to nose. And it was taking forever to set this elaborate shot up, and Chris was getting very irritated, and he literally had steam coming out of his ears, and he was saying, George, what is going on? Come on, can we get going with this? We're freezing to death. And it was very tense, and so George started whistling Edelweiss, and Chris said, enough of that, enough. And he said, well, I'm going to keep whistling it until you stop complaining. And Chris was like, ooh, and it was not exactly how I saw my first day with him coming about. And so I was standing there, and we were nose to nose, and it was really uncomfortable. So I, just out of nerves, said, so, come here often? And Chris felt this, his eyes started to twinkle, and his face cracked up, and he lost it and started laughing. He just thought it was hilarious, and I guess it was my nerves or whatever, and he just said, you're going to go far, young man. That was very funny, and just what was needed. And so we talked and relaxed, and we talked about all sorts of things. And so we got to the shot, and we did the scene, and it was a very short scene, and it was all went well. So I thought, well, I've passed that hurdle. And then the next day we were shooting in a Learjet, and I had all this information, expositional dialogue to go around. And Chris took me aside after the master was shot, and he said, you're throwing away your camera. It was totally Greek to me. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, it's a given that the camera is going to record you moving and talking, walking, gesturing, but what the eye of the camera needs to see to reach the heart of the audience is to see you think. And when you're giving a lot of informational dialogue like that, you need to find, where is it important for you? What is the thing that might be difficult for you to say, or it causes you pause or whatever? And then where is it important to see my reaction in there? And if you're staring at me the whole time, the editor will just make a choice and cut, and usually favor the star. And I'll give you a tip. I'm in this series every week. I've got all the coverage I need. You're the guest. You need to take your camera and keep it. And then he said, well, let me give you an example. If you had to say something like, I have something difficult to tell you, and it's hard for me, but I must. We had those very lines a couple of weeks ago. So you would take it a place, and you can look into a middle distance or find some place to look away and say, I have something difficult to tell you, and it's hard for me, but I must. And he said, when you take that moment, the hard for me moment, then the camera's going to stay with you because it sees that that's an important moment for you. And when you throw it to me and say, but I must, it's going to cut to me to say, well, my reaction is, well, what do you have to tell me, or whatever it is. So you give the editor the cut, you keep the camera for yourself, and you give the other actor the moment when it's most important for them to have that moment. It's good film technique, and you can go through your script beforehand and work out where those moments are. Don't get locked into them, but that's something that will give you the flavor of how to give a good film performance. And he taught me more in that 10 minutes than I had learned in anything I'd done about film acting. And it's a lesson I've used and learned and relearned and utilized many, many times. So he also taught me about using the axis, and I can't on a cell phone really show what it means, but when you've got the camera here and it comes around the other side, this would be the axis side. So on axis would be where you look towards where the camera's axis is. And when you look away, it's off. And you can use, when you turn your thoughts towards the camera, when you're on axis, you're more vulnerable, you're more open, and it's allowing the camera to see your moments, where if you turn away, you're more ashamed or you're hiding or whatever. And it can augment so many moments of any nature, whether you're saying, I love you, or did you steal something from me, or whatever. So he taught me a lot on that shoot. And it was another, huge lesson for me, because I'd been mostly doing theater and I hadn't done a lot of film. So he was a mentor to me again in the most useful way. And I've used those lessons and taught actors and taught young actors and helped them out with it so many times. And I finally got to work with them again on the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. And we had a scene, I wouldn't say together, we were in the same scene, sort of a mile from each other, but we hung out on set, and it was just fabulous to watch him work and watch what he did with very, very simple things. And it was just amazing. I hung around with Terry Gilliam at the Video Village the whole time just to watch Chris. It was like a masterclass. And it was just great to watch him again. And when we had time, I brought in the picture that he had signed for me, the poster that he'd signed for me. I'd also brought it in on Counter-Strike, and he was totally moved that I'd kept it, and he was very, very taken with it. So I showed it to him, and he showed it to Terry Gilliam and said, look at this, he's kept this all these years. And, we met, I helped him out. I tried to scare him out of it, and it didn't work. And Terry said, well, that's wonderful. So, Chris was responsible for you becoming an actor. And I said, yeah, he was. And he said, so I'm to blame for this life of misery and pain and rejection? And I said, well, I haven't really had much of that. And he said, well, what are you doing wrong? So he was very funny and so lovely. And we went out during the Counter-Strike time, and also at Stratford, he came up to visit, and we had many nights around the piano and telling funny stories. And he was just the most extraordinary man. And I feel blessed to have known him. I feel blessed to have been in his company and to have been taught by him. And I've been lucky also to have worked with many of the actors that he started out with, from the old days of the Ottawa Little Theatre and the Canadian Repertory and the Hart House and all of that. And they all were a type of actor that just had it in spades and were always willing to share and nurture. And Chris Plummer was number one in that regard. So this is my kiss to Chris and the celebration of an amazing actor who we've just lost. And again, I wouldn't be an actor if it weren't for him. So there you go.